little bit about Michael. Dr. Michael Salla is an internationally recognized scholar in international politics, conflict resolution, and U.S. foreign policy. He has taught at universities in the USA and Australia. He's the most popularly known as a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, which is the study of the main actors, institutions, and political processes associated with extraterrestrial life. Dr. Salla has appeared regularly on Ancient Aliens, Coast to Coast, Midnight in the Desert, Fade to Black, and given lectures around the world. His best-selling books include Kennedy's Last Stand, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and ET Alliances, the U.S. Navy Secret Space Program and Nordic Extraterrestrials Alliance, and also Antarctica's Hidden History, Corporate Foundations of a Secret Space Program. And then one extra book that can be added to that, which is the book on China's Secret Space Program that came out earlier this year, which is what we're exploring today. So it is my honor and my privilege to bring on Michael Salla. You there, brother? There you are.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for that introduction. I'm very glad to be here. Very happy to hear how many people are tuning in from all over the world. Well, welcome. Aloha. I'm here in Hawaii, so I'm wearing my Hawaii shirt. And thankfully, Hawaii just recently opened up again to visitors. We ended the quarantine, so people can come here without spending 2 weeks in quarantine now. So yeah, this is a different world. People have to deal with all of the local restrictions when visiting places, but we are welcoming people, and it's nice to have people joining us again. Well, we truly live in an amazing world at the moment. The transition is incredible. I mean, I'm sure you've all been very interested in what's happening in the United States. I know many of you are from out of the United States. Some of you are from the US. Of course, this election season is like none other. And it's not an accident that China figures prominently in the election. It's a big issue in this election, and it's going to get bigger. I mean, people really need to adjust to a world that we are entering where China and the United States are going to become the two dominant players in terms of the direction and the values that are going to dominate the planet. And we are seeing that now. And while we're used to the idea of the United States and China having a conflict over the economy, over cultural issues, over many aspects of life, one of the things people aren't really familiar with is space. How does this conflict with China that the United States is undergoing, and what is China's ambitions in space? And is China just a beginner, or is China a country that actually has been doing a lot in space secretly? So that's what I'm going to be doing today, is really running through just how far back in time China's secret space program goes, and exactly what they have, what they've prepared, and what that means for us today. I mean, the rest of the 21st century, at least for the next 50 years, is going to be one where China and the United States are going to be competing for global hegemony. In 1919, you had the Soviet Union emerging, and fairly soon after that, the Soviet Union and the United States became the dominant superpowers, and that conflict went on for close to 70 years. And so this scenario we're seeing now, where China and the United States are vying for global influence and space dominance, is something that is going to be around for the rest of the 21st century. So we got to get used to it. We've got to understand what is China doing. And so this is hopefully what I'm able to do with this presentation, is present you a clear picture of just when it all began for China, who the key players are, and what they have in space, and what is happening now in space in response to what China is doing, China's military build-up in space, and also what has the United States secretly done in space? Because from the perspective of China, they're responding to what the US and say Russia have already done in space. So yeah, all these questions I'll be tackling. So let me begin with my presentation. So I'll bring that up. So here we go. Share. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to begin with the first slide, and I am now going to show presenter view. So now hopefully you're all just seeing a picture of that first slide. And so this is the rise of the Red Dragon, China's secret space program. So let's begin. Let's go to this man, Dr. Shen, who really is the father of China's secret space program and China's conventional rocket-propelled program. He has quite a pedigree. He has a PhD from Caltech. He did an MA at MIT. His thesis advisor was Dr. Theodore von Karman, who is a legend in the United States. And one of the things to keep in mind is that Dr. Shen was a brilliant scientist that came into the United States under a Boxer Rebellion scholarship. This was before the 1949 revolution in China. So he came in as a graduate student, went to MIT, got his master's degree, then he went to Caltech and got his PhD studying under Theodore von Karman. Brilliant Chinese scientist in aeronautical engineering, which was really just taking off in that era. And it was the beginning of rocketry. And he actually was one of the founding members of the Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech. He was literally one of the founders. He wrote the first paper for JPL, and JPL was something that has been critical in the United States or NASA's space program. So this is the guy that actually helped set up JPL and helped set up NASA's space program through his association with JPL and the very first rocket experiments. And it really did begin at JPL with people like Dr. Shen and also Dr. Theodore von Karman, who is someone that is a legend in aeronautical engineering in the United States. He was a Hungarian scientist that came to the United States before the Second World War. And he was someone that was so outstanding and such a leader in the field of aeronautical engineering. As I said, he was very much involved with the creation of JPL. He was actually the person who got the US Army Air Force to come up with the first funding for JPL. That went to a group of students at Caltech who had set up JPL. It was under another name at the time called GALSIT. And Dr. Shen was part of that core group. And his thesis advisor was Dr. von Karman. So von Karman got the money from the Army Air Force to fund the establishment of JPL just before the Second World War took off, or the US got involved in the Second World War. So he's a critical figure. And one of the things about him is that he was so widely recognized in the world of aeronautical engineering that the commanding officer of the Army Air Force, at that time there was no US Air Force, there was the Army Air Force, and that was a General Hap Arnold, and he was a five-star general. He became a five-star general, and he basically asked von Karman to set up a study for what the future of aeronautical research and design or research and development is going to be. And he asked von Karman to look ahead 10 years, 20 years, even 50 years ahead and come up with a plan for what the Army Air Force needed to do to prepare for a future of the supersonic age. Because the Second World War largely involved, exclusively involved fighter jets or fighter planes, propeller-driven fighter planes on the Allied side. There were a few jets that were developed by Nazi Germany and deployed before the end of the World War. But these were all subsonic. General Arnold asked von Karman and said, we need to prepare for the supersonic age. And I want you to get your best scientists together and study everything that is out there and give me a plan, give the Army Air Force a plan for what they need to do to stay at the cutting edge or to stay ahead of adversaries for the next 10, 20 years or so. So that's what happened. So, General Arnold commissioned von Karman to set up a scientific advisory group to do that. Now, one of the things that the general was aware of and relayed that onto von Karman and von Karman's group is what was happening in Nazi Germany as far as supersonic aircraft is concerned. Now, everyone is familiar with the V1, the V2, that these were supersonic craft, and that the Army, Air Force, and the Navy were all interested in the V2 rockets of Nazi Germany. But what's not that well known is that Nazi Germany was also developing flying saucers, and that these were also capable of supersonic flight, and that there are a number of reports, FBI reports, CIA reports, these are official records that interview people that saw the testing of Nazi flying saucers in Europe during the war, and that these were capable of supersonic flight. So the Nazis were developing many different types of flying saucers, experimenting with different propulsion systems, different kind of weapon systems. They were trying to develop these for the war effort. And so this was something that US Army intelligence and the Navy knew about. And so General Arnold had the benefit of Army intelligence, and so he was wanting to know exactly what the Germans had developed. So one of the things that we know from the leaked records is that the Nazis were developing many different prototypes, but the successful prototypes, they were the ones that were put into production. The unsuccessful prototypes, they were left behind, and they were the ones that the Allied powers discovered. The United States, Britain, and Russia discovered the unsuccessful Nazi flying saucer prototypes. And those are the ones they took back to the United States or to Russia to begin studies and reverse engineering. But the Nazis had also developed successful prototypes and put those into production. And here you have a document that shows you the flying saucer production of different types of craft. You have there like the Hannibal series, the Hannibal 1, the Hannibal 2, the Hannibal 3. And this document is a document that first emerged in 1991. And it was something that was made available because of the end of the Cold War, and because so many secret files that the Warsaw Pact countries had kept in their intelligence services. With the end of the Cold War, these were sold to the highest bidder. So a bunch of documents made their way into the public arena, and this is one of the documents that made its way out. And it shows you how many different number of craft were built. So for example, you have the Hannibal 1. It tells us that there were 2 of those built. there were 52 tests, and it tells us the propulsion system of that craft. The Hannibal 2, it tells us that 7 were built. These were flight tested 106 times. The Hannibal 3, a larger craft, there were 19 of these. There was 1 of these built, and that was flight tested 19 times. And then the Vril 1, and there were 17 of these built, and they were flight tested 84. So these are the production statistics for just 3 craft, and 4 craft. And we know that 3 of these actually were eventually found and relocated to the United States, in particular Area 51. But I will be talking about that later. So this is what the Nazis were doing. So in the United States, von Karman was given the authority to establish a scientific advisory group, and that was a top team of scientists in the aeronautical engineering arena who would help him understand craft that were capable of supersonic flight that would be of interest to the Army Air Force. So von Karman had such a high regard for Dr. Shen that he made him part of his 3-man personal staff. One of the other people on von Karman's personal staff was Dr. Hugh Dryden, who became the first administrator of NASA in 1959. So it gives you an idea of just how high level and competent these people were. And so their goal was to help advise the Army Air Force on breakthrough technologies for the supersonic age. And so here's a document that shows you the Army Air Force Scientific Advisory Group. Von Karman was the director, and it tells you the membership of the Scientific Advisory Group. And here you have the arrow pointing to Dr. Shen, showing that he was part of this scientific advisory group. So as the war was coming to an end, von Karman was given permission by General Arnold to send some of these scientists to occupied Germany to find the scientists, to find the technologies that were involved in Nazi Germany's supersonic experiments and research. So that's what he did, and Dr. Shen was a part of that. So this takes us to Operation Lusty, and Lusty just stands for Luftwaffe Science and Technology. So the Army Air Force was clearly interested in any supersonic type craft that the Luftwaffe was involved in, and any other groups like the Nazi SS were also involved in supersonic aircraft and innovative breakthrough technologies. So either 2 or 3 teams were sent to occupied Germany to learn about the Nazis' breakthrough technologies and to bring back to the United States any German scientists that would help the United States reverse engineer these technologies. So Dr. Shen was part of this team that went over there. So here's a picture of him on the science team interrogating German scientists. So this is, here he is, he's wearing the army cap. He was given a temporary rank of colonel in the Army Air Force. Next to him is Dr. von Karman. He was the head of that scientific team for Operation Lusty, and they were interviewing some German scientists such as Dr. Brandt, who was a key figure in the Nazi Germany's aeronautical engineering efforts. So they were interrogating Nazi scientists. And Dr. Shen, a Chinese national, so keep in mind that Dr. Shen was not an American citizen. He was he's still in the process of getting his permanent residency in the United States. And he was given the rank of colonel and went on to was part of this Operation Lusty, studying the most advanced aerospace technologies Nazi Germany had. Now, you have to really, at this point, pause and ask yourself, well, how can this be? How can a Chinese national be given such access to the highest level of US secrecy, where he is given a rank of a full bird colonel, temporary rank, of course. He's allowed to go over to Germany as part of this elite scientific group to study the Germans' breakthrough aerospace projects. The simple answer to that is that it was because of his brilliance. He was Dr. von Karman's right-hand man while they were both at JPL, and Dr. von Karman was considered by the Army Air Force to be the undisputed leading expert in aeronautical studies. And that just didn't include rockets. It didn't just include supersonic aircraft, but it also included flying saucers. But I'll talk more about that. So Dr. Shen is over there in Germany, and he interviewed or interrogated different Nazi scientists, including Dr. Werner von Braun, who had been captured. And he's in Germany. He was one of the captured scientists working on the V2 rockets. And Dr. Shen interrogated von Braun in occupied Nazi Germany. So here you have a really unique situation where you actually have the future father of the NASA space program together with the future father of China's secret space program, who was also part of this establishment of an American secret space program. And of course, von Braun was critical in the V2 rockets. So these are two of the pivotal figures in the establishment of secret space programs or space programs in Nazi Germany, in the United States, and in China. Very important to keep that in mind. So after Dr. Shen had done all the interrogations, seen the prototype craft that the Nazis were working on, including flying saucers, that's something that he was made exposed to, because they were understanding all of the supersonic craft that Nazi Germany were working on. So Dr. Shen was given direct access to that, and he participated in a report that was actually given to the US Army Air Force, which was a blueprint for future aviation developments. So in this report, I can't remember the exact number of pages, I think it was several thousand pages altogether with annexes and so forth. Dr. Shen wrote an extensive number of papers as part of this report. And this was the primary responsibility of Dr. von Karman, but von Karman had Shen help him organize and help write key chapters for this study, which was a blueprint for the Army Air Force to be able to develop these, to prepare for the supersonic age. So that was something that was one of the key responsibilities that Dr. Shen had when he went back to the United States after Operation Lusty in Nazi Germany. So the next thing was the Scientific Advisory Board. This was created in 1946, immediately after the Second World War came to an end. General Arnold retired. He passed it on to General Karl Spatz, who was the new Army Air Force Commanding General. And so there was the creation of a Scientific Advisory Board, which was a group of civilian scientists that would report directly to the Army Air Force Chief of Staff to report on supersonic aircraft, because the Air Force or the Army Air Force had a bureaucracy, and it was found during the Second World War that there was great advantage in having civilian scientists work on advanced aerospace technologies and report directly to the commanding general, as opposed to go through the bureaucracy of the Army Air Force. So that model was developed and used for setting up the scientific advisory board. So here you would have civilian scientists, and Dr. Shen at this time was a full-time professor at JPL and also at MIT. He went back to MIT to work there for 3 years as a full professor. Now, Dr. Shen, while he was with the Scientific Advisory Board, he was appointed to be on this key panel for aerospace vehicles. So this was, and here you have his name in this list here. It gives you at the towards the bottom there, Dr. Shen Shen. Let's see. His name is here somewhere. I'm just having trouble finding it. Where is it? Oh, there he is, down at the very bottom, the very last name. So that tells you that the years that he was involved in, they were blacked out. So he was involved in the Scientific Advisory Group for 1946, 47, 48, and 49. What happened in 1950? Well, I will explain that. So he was a cutting edge figure for the Scientific Advisory Board, and the Scientific Advisory Board was involved in the studies of the recovered flying saucer crash at Roswell and other places in New Mexico in 1947. You know, this is something that is part of the history of the reverse engineering in the United States. And this Scientific Advisory Board, especially its aerospace vehicles panel, was a part of that. And Dr. Shen was involved, directly involved in the study of the recovered flying saucer craft, not only from Germany, but also from Roswell and other places in New Mexico, because he was at this very senior level. Now, Dr. Shen, he became a celebrity in the United States. He was so bright, and his thinking was so far ahead when it came to the applications of these breakthrough technology for supersonic craft. He became a household name, and there were many newspaper reports about his predictions that in the future, supersonic aircraft would be used in the civilian aerospace industry, and civilians would be able to get in a rocket-powered aircraft and fly from Los Angeles to New York in under an hour. So he was, and here you have a newspaper report actually interviewing, featuring Shen's views. And so this is something that you can read for yourself. You know, there's these newspaper stories from the 1950s, or from 1950, where Shen was a household name. He was pretty much very similar to Elon Musk in terms of his ability to be able to be a pioneer in these very new kind of aerospace ideas that were just percolating through the United States at the time. So that was 1950. He was at the height of his celebrity status in the United States. And what happened next was, and I should just mention, I will talk about his time at MIT shortly. So what happened next was really a big surprise. In 1950, Dr. Shen was arrested and basically faced accusations of being a communist spy, which was ridiculous because he came into the United States under a Chinese nationalist scholarship. He was married to the daughter of a prominent Chinese nationalist general, and many people pointed out how ridiculous it was to claim that Dr. Shen was a communist spy. But nevertheless, these were charges that were pursued by the FBI. And so he was arrested, and then there were claims that he was trying to take scientific papers out of the United States to China. And these were just his own scientific papers. So nevertheless, his fortunes changed overnight from being a celebrity to actually being someone that was vilified as a Chinese communist spy. And so Dr. Shen was incredibly devastated by this. He just felt betrayed. He just felt that all his work in the United States in helping develop its space program, in helping in these classified reverse engineering programs dealing with rockets, supersonic aircraft, flying saucers, that all his work in that area was not being acknowledged. So there was a 5-year legal battle, and eventually he was allowed to leave the United States and go back to China. So this was a really key moment in terms of the beginning of China's secret space program, because what China got when Dr. Shen left the United States was not just an ordinary scientist who had gotten his degrees in the United States. This was a man that was at the cutting edge of leading breakthrough technology projects in the aerospace sector in the United States, who was now being brought back to China or deported to China. And this was something that was truly incredible. Why did it happen? Why did US authorities allow a scientist who had been involved from the earliest period in the US entry into World War II, who had studied all the breakthrough technologies in the United States and in Nazi Germany, why was someone like that charged with being a communist spy and then deported? So why did they allow that to happen? Was it just McCarthy-era discrimination against Chinese? And certainly that was a factor. But Dr. Shen had a lot of friends, a lot of powerful supporters at Caltech, in the US scientific establishment. Dr. von Karman was a big supporter. So he had a lot of friends. So I think if it was just a mere case of racial discrimination, I think the arrest, the deportation, all of that would have been overturned. But we have to look seriously at the question, well, was it part of a deep state plan? So here we get to this idea of the deep state involvement. So let's look at this. Now the MJ-12 group, this is the group that was set up in the United States to oversee the development of breakthrough flying saucer technologies. This was a group that was one step beyond the development of rockets. They were looking at flying saucers, anti-gravity, electromagnetic propulsion systems, and anything to do with technologies that had been acquired from extraterrestrial visitors. So this was the group that was set up in 1947. And this is something we know from a document called the Eisenhower Briefing Document that was leaked in the 1990s. And what we know is that the Eisenhower Briefing Document referred to the MJ-12 group and described the 12 founding members of MJ-12. And you have people from all sectors of the military, of the national security establishment, and also the scientific establishment. And so there were kind of like 4 people from the scientific establishment, 4 people from the military, and 4 people from the national security side, you know, intelligence community and so forth. So out of the 4 people that was the scientists, 4 of those people, one of those was Dr. Jerome Hunsaker. So you can see he was he's the guy kind of in the middle row here, third on your right, and he was at MIT. at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was the head of the Department of Aeronautics, and he personally recruited Dr. Shen to work with him at MIT from 1946 to 1949. So he was working for Dr. Hunsaker, who himself was on the MJ-12 group. So this is a pretty powerful circumstantial evidence that Dr. Shen was actually advising MJ-12 on the reverse engineering of flying saucer technologies. And Dr. Hunsaker knew all about Shen and his knowledge of flying saucers. And because of his brilliance, they wanted him to be an advisor to MJ-12 and consult with them. So that's what he was doing. So the documents were released. So he died on September 10, and the documents, the Majestic 12 documents, the Eisenhower briefing document was released or leaked out in 1984. So that was actually a decade earlier than what I just said a little bit earlier. So that was in the 1984, the Eisenhower briefing document came out. And Dr. Hunsaker was the last living survivor of the MJ-12 group. So this is very important to keep in mind, that Dr. Shen was well known to the MJ-12 group. They knew about his knowledge, his expertise, and his brilliance. And the MJ-12 group was very, very powerful, connected to the highest level of the intelligence community. And I can tell you with utmost confidence that there is no way in the world that Dr. Shen would have been arrested and deported from the United States if MJ-12 didn't want that to happen. No way. FBI would never have done it. The fact that the FBI did it means that, to me, MJ-12 was part of this. So that gives us a kind of like a better idea of why, well, you know, what is MJ-12, what is the Majestic 12 group and its relationship with the deep state. So here's a graph that I put together to kind of help us understand. So at the very apex of the power structure on the planet are these bloodline families who believe themselves to be the descendants of the hybrid extraterrestrial human elites that once ruled humanity thousands of years ago. That the 13 bloodline families see themselves as the descendants of that. And that they have enormous power behind the scenes. So behind the scenes, as you follow that flow chart, you've got, in the United States, you've got the US president, and then you've got the deep state, the cabal, which basically routinely appoints the president. And this is something that's been going on for a long, long time. Typically, the bloodline families, through the deep state, the cabal, they work with, manipulate, or even choose US presidents. Then you get the next level down through the flow chart. You have the Central Intelligence Agency, heading the National Intelligence Program. You have the National Security Council. You have the Department of Defense. And the MJ-12, the group is actually embedded within the National Security Council, because the National Security Council is an interagency rubric for all of these different intelligence services, all of these defense groups and committees to work together with their peers from other departments, other agencies, to develop policies on key issues. And that's exactly what Majestic 12 group was set up to do, to develop a coherent US policy dealing with advanced flying saucer craft, anti-gravity craft, and the extraterrestrial issue. One of the things that Majestic 12 group is known for is unacknowledged special access programs. They have set up programs at facilities such as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base from the 1940s up until mid-1950s, and then the mid-1950s, a lot of the flying saucer craft that were stored at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base were relocated to Area 51, the S4 facility at Area 51. So the MJ-12 group has had oversight of all of that. And the MJ-12 group has also been very much involved in false flag events, in setting up things that make it look as though there's been a catastrophe or there's been a situation that is pinned on another actor, as opposed to the true actor being identified. So I think we all know false flag events such as the Gulf of Tonkin, where Vietnam was blamed for an attack on a US Navy warship that then justified Lyndon Johnson escalating the US involvement in the Vietnam War. So the Majestic 12 group is very much involved in that. And I think what happened to Dr. Shen Shen, we can see it as being part of this ability of the Majestic 12 group to set up these false flag events. So Chen returns to China in 1955, and he's very angry, very bitter over the treatment he received in the United States. And so he returns to China, and he's determined to help China develop a space program, and even its own secret space program, just like he saw the United States was doing with its reverse engineering of flying saucer craft. But China was technologically backward and very poor. And so Chen began by helping China establish a ballistic and nuclear missile program. And one of the first things he did was in 1956, he set up something called the Fifth Academy. And that was essentially an engineering think tank set up to design and produce supersonic craft or breakthrough technologies for the Chinese government, and in particular the People Liberations Army, the PLA. So today, the Fifth Academy, it's gone through a number of name changes and finally split around the early 1990s. But today it's called the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. And that is China's major aerospace company that builds craft for the PLA and the official Chinese space program. So CASC, that's the acronym that's used is CASC. For the China Aerospace Science Corporation, its acronym is CASC. So just get used to that acronym, because I will refer to that a little bit through the presentation. But today it is producing spacecraft for China's official space program. It's producing spacecraft for China's military space program, which is the secret space program of China. So CASC is involved in that. Dr. Shen was the original director of the engineering think tank that became CASC, and later on he was one of the leading directors as he became more and more focused on various classified projects that CASC was doing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Dr. Shen established the Zhuquan Launch Center in Gansu province, that's in the Gobi Desert, in 1958. That's China's first space rocket facility, and today it continues to be one of China's key spaceports for the Chinese space program, and that's located in the interior of China in the Gobi Desert. And right next to it, there are a number of secret military facilities that are part of China's secret military space program. And we'll talk about that shortly too. So here you have pictures of Shen When he returned to China in 1955, at the very top, he met with Chairman Mao Zedong, and below he met with Premier Zhou Enlai. So the Chinese leadership fast-tracked him into the leadership position of China's research and development of aerospace technologies, of supersonic craft, rockets, even nuclear warheads on ballistic missiles. Shen was involved in that, and also flying saucer technologies. But that happened a lot later, and I'll explain why. So Shen developed the first Chinese missiles. This was the Dongfeng East Wind series of ballistic missiles that were developed by China. You can see Dongfeng 1, that was a Soviet design, first tested in 1960, then another one, 1966, that was developed by Shen, and that carried a nuclear warhead. And that was China's first nuclear missile test. And the world's first nuclear missile test. That was something that was considered extremely dangerous. So the Chinese, even the Russians and the Americans didn't launch ballistic, didn't test nuclear weapons on, didn't do a test using a rocket as part of the test. Chen also developed the first long march rockets for the satellite program. So in 1970, China launched its first space satellite. This was a 3-stage rocket, and that was launched on April 24th, launched from Zhuquan Satellite Launch Center that had been established by Dr. Shen. So we're talking about someone that truly was the father of China's conventional rocket program, and that was very much a part of the PLA's military program. So he was honored for those achievements, and because he helped in building the first ballistic missiles and helping develop the ballistic missile that could carry a nuclear warhead, he was awarded the 2 bombs and 1 satellite merit award. The 2 bombs were the atomic bomb, the hydrogen bomb, and of course the ballistic missiles that were developed by Chen for that. And of course he went on to be a key figure in developing rockets and spacecraft for CASC for decades to come. So Dr. Shen also had a lot of information about the flying saucer program that the US Air Force was developing. He was involved with that, he knew that, but he couldn't do anything to help China develop its own secret space program using flying saucer craft for many decades, because China still needed to develop the kind of technological know-how. It had to develop generations of scientists and engineers that could understand the advanced concepts that were necessary. And because China's economy was so small, it meant the money wasn't there. That after China had given so much money over to the PLA for developing ballistic nuclear missiles, for developing satellites, that there was no money left over for flying saucer research. So this was something that kind of like was just put on hold until such time as China was able to economically find the money to be able to pursue a major flying saucer research and development program. So in the 1980s, China began to be helped again. China began to be helped by the US in advanced technology projects. So here you have President Ronald Reagan meeting with Deng Xiaoping in the early 1980s. That I think that would have been 1983, around that time. And Ronald Reagan implemented technology agreements, technology sharing agreements with China, and giving a lot of assistance to China in terms of training and educating their students in science and engineering for developing all sorts of advanced programs, including aerospace, the aerospace field. Now, the driving force behind these technology exchange agreements was Vice President George Bush, who I think most of you are probably aware was the former CIA director. He was also the first envoy to China after Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger went to China to reestablish contact between China and the United States. There was an unofficial embassy set up in Beijing, China, until the US Congress could ratify the agreements and set up an official embassy. So up until that time, there was a liaison office. And so George Bush was the de facto ambassador to China. And then later on, he went on to become CIA director, became vice president. And as he was vice president, he was the guy that was behind the technology agreements. He was the one that was driving those and getting Ronald Reagan to sign off on that. Now, why is that important? Because earlier on when I showed you the flow chart, the CIA is a key part of the way the deep state operates in funding and technology programs and so forth. And what George Bush was following the agenda of the deep state in helping build China up, to give it access to aerospace technologies and other advanced technologies, to train Chinese students, engineers, scientists. That this all began happening this rapidly began happening under the Reagan administration, because George Bush, as vice president, was part of the deep state. And the deep state agenda was to pour technology into China to help it rapidly develop technologically.